Sarah Martinez had always been small for her age. At 22, she barely reached 5 feet 2 inches and weighed just over 100 pounds. Her delicate features and soft-spoken nature made people assume she was fragile, someone who needed protection rather than someone who could provide it. This assumption followed her everywhere, including into the military training camp where she now found herself on a scorching Tuesday morning in Texas. The drill sergeant's voice boomed across the dusty training ground as 30 new recruits stood at attention. Sarah was the only woman in the group, something that hadn't gone unnoticed by her fellow trainees. For the past 3 weeks, she had endured constant whispers, sideways glances, and barely concealed smirks. The men around her came from all walks of life. Farmers' sons with calloused hands, city boys trying to prove their toughness, and former high school football players who still carried themselves like they owned the world. "Today we separate the real soldiers from the wannabes," Sergeant Murphy announced, his weathered face scanning the group with sharp eyes. "Marksmanship training begins now. Some of you think you know how to shoot because you've been hunting with Daddy or played some video games. Let me tell you something. Military precision is a whole different beast." The recruits were led to the shooting range where several rifles were lined up on a long table. Sarah had never held a military rifle before, but she wasn't completely unfamiliar with firearms. Her grandfather had been a hunter and had taught her the basics on an old .22 rifle when she was just 10 years old. Those summer afternoons at his small ranch felt like a lifetime ago, and she wondered if any of those lessons would help her now. Marcus Thompson, a burly recruit from Alabama, who had made it his mission to remind everyone about his hunting prowess, was the first to grab a rifle. "Been shooting since I was 8, he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Bagged my first deer at 12, this should be easy." Several other recruits nodded approvingly, clearly impressed by his confidence. Jake Morrison, a former college athlete, flexed his considerable muscles as he picked up his weapon. "These things got some kick to them?" he asked with a grin. "I'm used to handling heavy equipment. This little thing shouldn't be a problem." More laughter rippled through the group. When Sarah stepped forward to select her rifle, the snickering began in earnest. "Hey, Princess, you sure you can handle that thing?" called out Danny Rodriguez, a stocky recruit from Chicago. "That rifle's probably heavier than you are." The laughter grew louder, and even some of the more reserved recruits couldn't help but smile at the comment. "Maybe we should get her a water gun instead," added Kevin Walsh, earning another round of chuckles. "Don't want her to hurt herself with all that recoil." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that reacting to such comments only made things worse. Instead, she quietly picked up a rifle, surprised by its weight but not intimidated by it. The metal felt cold and solid in her hands and somehow familiar despite its military design. Sergeant Murphy demonstrated the proper stance, grip, and breathing technique. "Marksmanship isn't about being the biggest or strongest," he explained. "It's about focus, patience, and control. The best snipers I've known weren't always the obvious choices. Sometimes the quiet ones surprise you." As he spoke, Sarah found herself thinking about her grandfather's words from years ago. "Shooting isn't about forcing the gun to do what you want," he had told her as they sat on his porch one evening. "It's about becoming one with the weapon, understanding its rhythm, and letting everything else fade away. The target, the rifle, and you, all connected by a single moment of perfect stillness." The first round of shooting was at stationary targets 50 yards away. Marcus stepped up confidently, adjusted his stance with exaggerated precision, and fired 5 shots. 3 hit the outer rings of the target, 1 missed completely, and 1 grazed the edge. He frowned but tried to maintain his swagger. "Just warming up," he muttered, though his voice had lost some of its earlier bravado. Jake's turn was similar. Decent shots, but nothing spectacular. Danny managed to hit the target with all 5 rounds, but scattered across different sections without any real grouping. One by one, the recruits took their turns, each producing adequate but unremarkable results. The laughter and jokes continued, though they were now mixed with concentration and the occasional grunt of frustration. When Sarah's turn came, the comments resumed with fresh energy. "Bet she can't even hit the target," someone whispered. "This should be good for a laugh," added another voice. She walked to the firing line, acutely aware that all eyes were on her. The weight of their expectations, or rather their lack of expectations, pressed down on her shoulders. She assumed the position Sergeant Murphy had demonstrated, but something felt off. Instinctively, she made small adjustments to her stance, shifting her weight slightly and repositioning her grip based on what felt natural, rather than what had been shown. The rifle seemed to settle into her hands like it belonged there. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering her grandfather's patient voice. "Don't fight the gun, sweetheart. Let it show you where it wants to go." She lined up the sights, controlled her breathing, and slowly squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked, and she absorbed the recoil smoothly, already realigning for the next shot before the first had even reached the target. The laughter behind her died down as she continued firing, each shot deliberate and controlled. When she finished her 5 rounds and stepped back, an unusual quiet had fallen over the group. Through the spotting scope, Sergeant Murphy examined her target, his eyebrows rising slightly. 4 of her 5 shots had hit within the center ring, with the 5th just barely outside it, a grouping tighter than anyone else had managed that day. The silence stretched on as the implication sank in. The smallest, quietest member of their unit had just outperformed every single one of them on her first military shooting exercise. The jokes and laughter had stopped completely, replaced by surprised murmurs and uncomfortable shifting of feet. Sarah set down her rifle and stepped back into the group, her expression calm and unchanged. But inside, she felt a small spark of something she hadn't experienced in weeks at the camp: confidence. Her grandfather's lessons had indeed stayed with her, and perhaps there was more to military life than just surviving the mockery of her fellow recruits. News of Sarah's shooting performance spread through the camp faster than wildfire. By evening chow, every recruit in their battalion had heard some version of the story. The details grew more dramatic with each telling. Some claimed she had hit 5 perfect bullseyes. Others insisted she had been shooting with her eyes closed. The truth was impressive enough, but military camps thrived on exaggeration and legend-making. Marcus Thompson sat at the far end of the mess hall, stabbing at his mashed potatoes with unusual aggression. His hunting stories, which had entertained fellow recruits for weeks, suddenly seemed less impressive. The confident swagger he had carried since arrival now felt forced and hollow. "It was just beginner's luck," he muttered to anyone who would listen. "Wait until we do some real shooting, that's when experience matters." Jake Morrison took a different approach, trying to downplay the significance of the exercise entirely. "Shooting paper targets isn't real combat," he announced during their evening break. "When bullets are flying back at you, that's when you see who's really got what it takes. I bet she'd freeze up in a real firefight." Several recruits nodded along, eager to restore their bruised egos. But Sergeant Murphy had been training soldiers for 15 years, and he recognized something special when he saw it. That evening, he pulled Sarah aside after the official training day had ended. The setting sun cast long shadows across the empty shooting range as they walked together, their boots crunching on the gravel. "Martinez, where did you learn to shoot? Like that?" he asked, his gruff exterior softening slightly. It wasn't often that a recruit surprised him, and genuine talent was always worth investigating. Sarah hesitated before answering. Talking about her grandfather always brought up complicated emotions. "My grandfather taught me when I was young, Sergeant. He was a veteran from Korea, spent a lot of time hunting after he came back. Said it helped him find peace." She paused, remembering the patient old man who had shown her how to hold her breath, how to squeeze the trigger slowly, how to trust her instincts. Murphy nodded approvingly. "Good foundation. But what you did today was more than just good teaching. You've got natural ability. Question is, what do you want to do with it?" The conversation planted a seed in Sarah's mind. For weeks, she had been focused simply on surviving basic training, on proving she belonged in a world that seemed determined to exclude her. The constant doubts and criticism from her fellow recruits had made her question her decision to enlist. But Murphy's words suggested possibilities she hadn't considered. The next day brought advanced marksmanship training. This time, the targets were placed at 100 yards, and the conditions were more challenging. A steady crosswind swept across the range, and the morning sun created shifting shadows that could throw off even experienced shooters. The stakes felt higher, and tension among the recruits was palpable. Danny Rodriguez, determined to redeem himself after his poor performance the day before, went first. He took extra time aiming, trying to compensate for the wind and distance. His shots were more accurate than before, but still scattered across the target face. "Not bad for these conditions," he said, trying to maintain his confidence. Kevin Walsh followed with similar results. The wind was clearly affecting everyone's performance, and the increased distance made precision much more difficult. One by one, the recruits struggled with the challenging conditions. Even Marcus, despite his claims of extensive hunting experience, could only manage to hit the target with 3 of his 5 shots. When Sarah stepped up to the firing line, the whispers began again, but they carried a different tone now. There was curiosity mixed with skepticism, anticipation alongside doubt. Yesterday's performance had earned her a grudging respect, but many still believed it had been a fluke. Sarah studied the range conditions carefully, watching how the wind affected the grass and the hanging wind indicators placed at various distances. Her grandfather had taught her to read the environment, to understand that successful shooting meant working with nature rather than fighting against it. "The wind isn't your enemy," he used to say. "It's just another factor in the equation. Learn to dance with it." She adjusted her stance to account for the crosswind, made subtle changes to her aim point, and settled into the familiar rhythm of controlled breathing. The first shot rang out, and through the spotting scope, Murphy saw it hit just left of center, a solid hit that accounted perfectly for the wind drift. The second shot followed quickly, this time dead center. Sarah was finding her groove, adapting to the conditions with an intuitive understanding that couldn't be taught from manuals. Her third shot matched the second, and by the fourth, even the skeptical recruits had fallen silent. When the fifth shot completed another tight grouping in the center of the target, the silence was deafening. Not only had she adapted to the more difficult conditions, but her performance had actually improved from the previous day. While everyone else struggled with the wind and distance, she had made it look effortless. Sergeant Murphy walked over to examine the target himself, shaking his head in amazement. "Martinez, in 15 years of training recruits, I've never seen natural ability like this. Have you ever considered specialized marksmanship training?" The question hung in the air as Sarah considered its implications. Specialized training would mean leaving the regular infantry track, pursuing a path that few soldiers ever had the opportunity to attempt. It would also mean more intense scrutiny, higher expectations, and potentially even more isolation from her peers. That evening, word of Sarah's second impressive performance reached the base commander's office. Colonel Patricia Harrison, a decorated veteran with 30 years of service, reviewed the shooting scores with interest. She had broken barriers herself during her career, fighting for recognition in a male-dominated field, and she recognized the challenges Sarah was likely facing. "Send for Martinez," she told her aide. "I want to meet this recruit everyone's talking about." Meanwhile, in the barracks, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The joking and casual dismissal had been replaced by uncomfortable silence and sideways glances. Some recruits tried to process their assumptions being challenged, while others doubled down on finding reasons to diminish Sarah's achievements. "Shooting isn't everything," Jake insisted to a small group gathered around his bunk. "When we get to combat training, hand-to-hand, obstacle courses, that's when size and strength matter. She'll wash out when things get really tough," but privately, doubts were creeping in. If they had been so wrong about Sarah's shooting ability, what else might they have misjudged? The confident predictions about her inevitable failure were starting to sound less certain, more like desperate hopes than realistic assessments. Sarah herself remained quietly focused on her training, but the seed Sergeant Murphy had planted was beginning to grow. For the first time since enlisting, she began to see her military service not just as something to endure, but as a potential pathway to something greater. The laughter and mockery that had defined her first weeks were fading, replaced by a grudging respect that felt like the beginning of real acceptance. As she cleaned her rifle that night, following the meticulous process her grandfather had taught her years ago, Sarah allowed herself to imagine possibilities beyond just completing basic training. Perhaps there was a place for someone like her in the military after all, not despite her differences, but because of them. Colonel Patricia Harrison's office was a study in military precision and personal achievement. The walls displayed commendations from 3 decades of service, photographs with high-ranking officials, and mementos from deployments around the world. When Sarah entered and stood at attention, she felt both intimidated and inspired by the evidence of what a woman could accomplish in the military. "At ease, Martinez," Colonel Harrison said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I've been reviewing your marksmanship scores. Quite impressive for someone with no formal training." Her tone was professional but not unfriendly, and Sarah detected a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Sarah sat carefully, maintaining perfect posture despite her nervousness. "Thank you, ma'am. I had some informal instruction from my grandfather when I was younger." The colonel leaned back in her chair, studying Sarah with the practiced eye of someone who had evaluated countless soldiers over her career. "Sergeant Murphy tells me you're a natural. He's not easily impressed, so that means something. Have you given any thought to specialized training?" The question Sarah had been pondering since Murphy first mentioned it was suddenly very real and immediate. "I'm not sure I understand all the options, ma'am." Colonel Harrison smiled slightly. "There are several advanced programs for exceptional marksmen: scout sniper training, designated marksman courses, competitive shooting teams. Each requires different skills and offers different opportunities. But first, we need to see how you perform under more challenging conditions." She pulled out a thick folder and opened it to reveal training schedules and course descriptions. "I'm arranging for you to participate in some advanced exercises over the next 2 weeks. You'll be training alongside soldiers who've been specifically selected for marksmanship programs. Consider it an extended evaluation." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Will I still be training with my current unit, ma'am?" "You'll maintain your regular training schedule, but you'll have additional sessions with the advanced marksmanship group. I won't lie to you, Martinez. It will be demanding. You'll be working longer days, facing more challenging scenarios, and training with soldiers who have more experience than your current peers." The next morning, Sarah reported to a different section of the base for her first advanced training session. The group was small, only 8 soldiers, all male and all several years older than her. They eyed her arrival with barely concealed skepticism. Unlike the raw recruits she trained with daily, these men had already completed basic training and were working towards specialized military occupations. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen, a compact man with weathered hands and sharp eyes, led the group. He had served 2 tours as a designated marksman and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had proven his skills in combat. "So you're the recruit everyone's talking about," he said to Sarah. "We'll see if the stories match reality." The first exercise was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Instead of shooting from a comfortable prone position at stationary targets, she was required to engage multiple targets from various positions while navigating obstacles. The scenario simulated real combat conditions with time pressure and physical stress, adding layers of complexity. "In real situations, you don't get to take your time and set up perfect shots," Chen explained as he demonstrated the course. "You might be shooting around cover, from awkward positions or while moving between locations. Comfort zone shooting is just the beginning." Tommy Rodriguez, a veteran soldier from Sarah's home state of Texas, was the first to attempt the course. He moved through the obstacles with practiced efficiency, engaging targets from behind barriers, around corners, and from elevated positions. His shots were accurate and quick, hitting 7 out of 10 targets within the time limit. Michael Chang, a quiet soldier from California who had already completed sniper school, performed even better, hitting 9 targets while maintaining smooth movement through the course. His technique was flawless and he made the complex movements look effortless. When Sarah's turn came, she felt the familiar weight of expectation and scrutiny. These men weren't raw recruits. They were experienced soldiers who had already proven themselves. Impressing them would require more than just good aim. She would need to demonstrate adaptability and composure under pressure. She approached the first obstacle, a low wall that required shooting from a supported position. Instead of trying to mimic exactly what she had seen the others do, Sarah trusted her instincts and found a slightly different shooting position that felt more natural for her smaller frame. The first target fell cleanly. Moving to the next position required crawling under a barrier and then engaging targets from an awkward angle. Sarah found herself drawing on childhood memories of playing in her grandfather's barn, squeezing through tight spaces and shooting from unusual positions during their informal practice sessions. The course required constant movement and quick target acquisition. Sarah's smaller size, which had been seen as a disadvantage, actually helped her navigate some obstacles more efficiently than the larger soldiers. She moved fluidly from position to position, her shots coming in steady rhythm. When she completed the course, hitting 8 out of 10 targets within the time limit, the advanced group's attitude shifted noticeably. This wasn't a fluke or beginner's luck. Sarah had demonstrated genuine skill under challenging conditions. Not bad, Chen admitted, though his tone suggested he was more impressed than he was willing to show. Your movement was good, and you adapted well to the different shooting positions. There's definite potential here. Over the following days, the advanced training intensified. Sarah learned to shoot in low-light conditions, to engage moving targets, and to make accurate shots at distances up to 300 yards. Each exercise pushed her abilities in new directions, but she continued to surprise both herself and her instructors. The breakthrough moment came during a night shooting exercise. Using night vision equipment and engaging targets illuminated only by brief flashes, Sarah had to adapt to completely different visual conditions. Many experienced soldiers struggled with night shooting, finding the equipment disorienting and the reduced visibility challenging. But Sarah's ability to focus intensely and trust her instincts served her well in the darkness. She found that the quieter environment actually helped her concentration, eliminating visual distractions and allowing her to rely more heavily on technique and muscle memory. When the scores were tallied, Sarah had outperformed half of the experienced soldiers in the group, including some who had completed advanced training courses. The achievement was all the more remarkable considering she had been using night vision equipment for the first time. That evening, Staff Sergeant Chen approached her privately. Martinez, I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've seen a lot of soldiers come through advanced training. You've got something special. Your technique is still rough around the edges, and you need more experience with different weapon systems, but your natural ability is exceptional. He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. There's a selection process coming up for Scout Sniper School in 3 months. It's the most demanding marksmanship program the military offers. Most candidates are infantry soldiers with years of experience, but occasionally they accept exceptional candidates with less time in service. Sarah felt her heart racing. Scout Sniper training represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship, a program so selective that many qualified soldiers never got the opportunity to attend. I'd be willing to recommend you for consideration, Chen continued, but I want you to understand what you'd be getting into. The program has a 70% failure rate. The academic work is brutal, the physical requirements are extreme, and the mental pressure is intense. And as the only woman ever to attempt the program, you'd face additional challenges that wouldn't affect other candidates. Sarah thought about how far she had come in just a few weeks. From being the target of constant jokes to training with experienced soldiers and considering elite military programs. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, since enlisting, she felt truly excited about her future in the military. What would I need to do to prepare, Sergeant? She asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the opportunity being offered. Chen smiled for the first time since she had met him. Now that's the right question. Let's talk about what the next 3 months are going to look like. The next 3 months transformed Sarah's military experience completely. While her original training unit completed their basic programs and moved on to their assigned military occupational specialties, Sarah remained at the training base under an intensive preparation regimen designed by Staff Sergeant Chen. Her days began at 04:30 with physical conditioning, followed by 8 hours of marksmanship training, academic study, and fieldcraft instruction. The physical demands were brutal. Scout Sniper candidates needed to carry heavy equipment over long distances, remain motionless for hours in uncomfortable positions, and maintain peak performance despite fatigue and discomfort. Sarah's small frame, which had been an asset in shooting positions, now became a challenge as she struggled to keep pace with training standards designed for larger soldiers. "You're going to have to work twice as hard as everyone else," Chen explained during a particularly grueling training session. "In sniper school, they don't adjust standards based on size or gender. You either meet the requirements or you fail. No exceptions, no excuses." Sarah attacked the physical training with fierce determination. She spent extra hours in the gym, building strength and endurance. She practiced carrying equipment loads that represented significant percentages of her body weight, conditioning herself for the demands she would face. The other soldiers on base began to notice her dedication, and slowly, respect replaced the earlier skepticism. The academic preparation was equally demanding. Sniper training required mastery of complex subjects including ballistics, meteorology, range estimation, and tactical planning. Sarah spent evenings studying physics equations that governed bullet trajectories, learning how temperature, humidity, and air pressure affected accuracy at long distances. "Most people think sniping is just about being a good shot," explained Gunnery Sergeant Lisa Park, a Marine instructor who had been brought in to help with Sarah's preparation. "That's maybe 20% of it. The other 80% is math, science, patience, and mental toughness. You need to think like an engineer and act like a ghost." Park was one of only 3 women who had attempted Marine sniper training in the past decade, and though she had ultimately been reassigned due to injury rather than academic failure, her insights proved invaluable. She understood the unique pressures Sarah would face as a female candidate in an overwhelmingly male environment. "They're going to test your resolve in ways that go beyond the official curriculum," Park warned during one of their evening study sessions. "Some instructors will assume you're there to prove a point rather than to become a sniper. You'll need to demonstrate that you're focused on the mission, not on making statements about women in combat." As Sarah's skills developed, word of her preparation spread beyond the training base. Colonel Harrison received regular updates on her progress, and the reports were consistently positive. Sarah's marksmanship continued to improve, but more importantly, she was developing the mental discipline and tactical thinking required for advanced operations. The breakthrough moment came during a field exercise in the 7th week of her preparation. Sarah was required to establish a concealed position, observe a target area for 12 hours, and engage simulated enemies at ranges up to 600 yards. The exercise tested not just shooting skills, but patience, camouflage, and tactical decision-making. Sarah selected her position carefully, using natural terrain features to create concealment while maintaining clear fields of fire toward the target area. She spent 2 hours camouflaging her position, using local vegetation and careful positioning to break up her outline. Then came the hardest part: waiting. Hours passed with minimal activity in the target area. Sarah remained motionless, fighting the urge to shift positions or adjust her equipment. She monitored weather conditions, calculated range adjustments, and maintained constant awareness of her surroundings. When targets finally appeared, she was ready. The first engagement came at 0800, when a figure appeared at 400 yards. Sarah made quick calculations for range and wind, adjusted her scope, and fired. The target fell immediately. Over the next 4 hours, she engaged 6 more targets at various ranges, hitting each with her first shot while maintaining her concealed position. When the exercise concluded and evaluators reached Sarah's position, they were impressed not just by her shooting, but by her fieldcraft. Her position had been virtually invisible from more than 50 yards away, and she had maintained perfect concealment throughout the 12-hour exercise. "Outstanding work, Martinez," said Master Sergeant Williams, the senior evaluator. "Your patience and discipline were exemplary. This is exactly the kind of performance we need to see from sniper candidates." The success of the field exercise marked a turning point in how Sarah was perceived by the training cadre. She was no longer seen as an experiment or curiosity, but as a legitimate candidate with genuine potential for success in the sniper program. With 1 month remaining before the selection process, Sarah's training intensified further. She learned advanced camouflage techniques, practiced moving silently through different types of terrain, and studied the tactical employment of sniper teams. The coursework expanded beyond individual marksmanship to include mission planning, intelligence gathering, and operational security. Captain James Morrison, a veteran sniper instructor with 4 combat deployments, conducted Sarah's final evaluation. Morrison had initially been skeptical about training a female candidate, but Sarah's consistent performance had earned his professional respect. Martinez. "I've been teaching this subject for 6 years, he said, after watching her complete a complex shooting scenario. "I've seen infantry veterans with years of experience struggle with concepts that you're mastering in weeks. Your natural ability is exceptional, but more importantly, you have the mental attributes that can't be taught." The evaluation included written examinations covering tactical procedures, ballistics calculations, and equipment maintenance. Sarah scored in the top 10%, demonstrating mastery of material that many experienced soldiers found challenging. As the selection date approached, Sarah felt both confident and nervous. Her preparation had been thorough, and her skills had developed dramatically over the past 3 months. But she was also aware that sniper school would present challenges she hadn't encountered yet, and the pressure of being the first woman to attempt the program added psychological stress to an already demanding experience. The night before reporting for selection, Sarah called her mother for the first time since beginning her advanced training. She had maintained regular correspondence but had avoided phone calls, not wanting to worry her family about the intensity of her training. "I'm proud of you, Mija," her mother said, using the childhood nickname that always made Sarah smile. "Your grandfather would be so proud too. He always said you had a special gift, but he also taught you that gifts only matter if you're willing to work for them." That reminder of her grandfather's wisdom provided comfort as Sarah prepared for the most challenging experience of her military career. Tomorrow, she would join 11 other candidates for the beginning of Scout Sniper School. The next 8 weeks would determine whether months of preparation would translate into success in one of the military's most demanding programs. As she packed her equipment that evening, carefully organizing the gear that would accompany her, through the selection process, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. 3 months ago, she had been dodging jokes about her ability to handle a rifle. Now she was preparing to compete with the military's elite marksmen for a place in one of its most prestigious programs. The laughter that had once mocked her capabilities had long since faded, replaced by serious recognition of her potential. Tomorrow would begin the ultimate test of whether that potential could be realized under the most demanding conditions the military could create. Scout Sniper School began at 0400 on a gray Monday morning in November. 12 candidates stood in formation outside the training facility, their breath visible in the cold air as they waited for their first encounter with the cadre of instructors, who would determine their fate over the next 8 weeks. Sarah was the smallest person in the group by a significant margin, and the only woman among 11 battle-tested soldiers. Chief Instructor Master Sergeant Rick Stone stepped out of the building with the measured pace of a man who had broken countless students over his 15-year teaching career. His eyes swept across the candidates with the calculating gaze of a predator evaluating prey. When his gaze reached Sarah, it lingered for a moment longer than the others, but his expression remained professionally neutral. "For the next 8 weeks, you belong to me," Stone announced, his voice carrying easily across the formation. "This program has a 70% failure rate for a reason. Most of you will not be here at graduation. Some will fail academically, others will fail the physical requirements, and some will simply decide they don't want it badly enough." The first week was designed to establish baseline capabilities and begin the psychological pressure that would intensify throughout the program. Academic classes covered advanced ballistics, meteorology, and range estimation. Sarah found herself drawing on her months of preparation, but the pace was relentless and the material was more complex than anything she had encountered. The physical requirements were equally demanding. Candidates were required to carry full equipment loads over increasingly difficult terrain, maintain shooting proficiency despite exhaustion, and demonstrate tactical movements under observation. Sarah's smaller stature required her to work harder than her peers to meet the same standards, but her months of preparation had built the necessary strength and endurance. Sergeant First Class David Kumar, one of the assistant instructors, watched Sarah carefully during the first week's exercises. Kumar had been initially skeptical about having a female candidate in the program, but her performance was forcing him to reconsider his assumptions. "She's not trying to prove anything," he mentioned to Stone after observing Sarah during a particularly challenging stalking exercise. "No grandstanding, no attitude. She just focuses on the task and executes. That's exactly what we want to see." The first major test came during the second week with a comprehensive examination covering ballistics calculations, range estimation, and target identification. The academic failure rate at this point was typically 30%, as candidates struggled with the mathematical complexity required for precision shooting at extended ranges. Sarah approached the examination with the methodical precision that had become her trademark. Each problem required multiple calculations accounting for variables like bullet drop, wind drift, atmospheric conditions, and target movement. She worked steadily through the material, double-checking her math and ensuring each answer was complete and accurate. When the results were posted the next morning, Sarah had achieved the highest score in the class, outperforming soldiers with years of additional experience and training. The achievement was particularly significant because academic failure was one of the most common reasons for elimination from the program. "Outstanding work, Martinez," Stone said privately after reviewing the scores. "But remember, this is just the beginning. The academic work gets harder, and we haven't even begun the really challenging shooting yet." The third week introduced long-range precision shooting, with targets placed at distances up to 800 yards. At these ranges, environmental factors became critical, and small errors in calculation or technique resulted in complete misses. The pressure was intense, as shooting failures could result in immediate elimination from the program. Sarah's first attempt at 600-yard shooting was a humbling experience. Despite perfect calculations and careful preparation, her first shot missed the target completely. The distance was greater than anything she had attempted before, and the margin for error was virtually non-existent. "Happens to everyone the first time," said Staff Sergeant Mike Chen, the marksmanship instructor. "At this distance, everything matters. Your breathing, your trigger control, your position, any small mistake gets magnified significantly." Sarah spent the evening reviewing her performance, analyzing what had gone wrong, and preparing for the next day's attempt. She practiced her breathing exercises, refined her shooting position, and studied weather data to better understand how environmental conditions affected her shots. The next morning brought better conditions and improved performance. Sarah's first shot at 600 yards hit within the scoring rings, followed by 4 more shots that grouped tightly around the center of the target. Her confidence was returning, and she was beginning to understand how to perform at these extended ranges. By the 4th week, 3 candidates had already been eliminated, 2 for academic failures and 1 for shooting deficiencies. The pressure on the remaining 9 was intensifying, and the camaraderie that had developed during the first weeks was beginning to show strain as competition for limited positions increased. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly challenging exercise in the 5th week. Candidates were required to engage targets at varying ranges while accounting for complex wind conditions and time constraints. The scenario simulated real combat conditions where snipers might need to engage multiple targets quickly and accurately. Sarah found herself in a familiar mental state, the same calm focus that had served her well since her first day on the shooting range. The external pressure and complexity of the scenario seemed to fade away, leaving only her, the rifle, and the targets. She engaged the first target at 400 yards, adjusted for the shifting wind, and moved smoothly to the second target at 600 yards. Her shots came in steady rhythm, each one carefully calculated but executed with fluid confidence. When the exercise concluded, she had successfully engaged all 7 targets within the time limit, achieving the best overall score among the remaining candidates. "That was exceptional shooting, Martinez," Stone acknowledged after reviewing her performance. "You demonstrated the kind of composure under pressure that we're looking for in operational snipers. Well done." The recognition from Stone carried special weight because he was known for his reluctance to praise students. Other candidates began to view Sarah differently, no longer seeing her as someone who might not belong in the program but as serious competition for the limited graduation slots. Corporal James Wright, a veteran infantry soldier from North Carolina, approached Sarah after the exercise. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. When I first saw you in the class, I thought this was some kind of social experiment. I was wrong. You've earned your place here." The acknowledgement meant more to Sarah than any official recognition could have. Wright was respected by the other candidates, and his acceptance represented a broader shift in how the group viewed her presence in the program. The 6th week brought the most challenging phase of training: extended field exercises that combined all the skills learned in previous weeks. Candidates were required to operate independently for 72 hours, establishing concealed positions, conducting surveillance, and engaging targets while avoiding detection by opposing forces. Sarah's field exercise began before dawn on a Tuesday morning. She carried a full equipment load weighing nearly 40 pounds, including specialized optics, camouflage materials, and survival gear. Her mission was to establish an observation post overlooking a simulated enemy compound and gather intelligence while remaining undetected. The first challenge was reaching her intended position without being spotted by the instructors who were actively hunting for students. Sarah moved carefully through the wooded terrain, using natural cover and avoiding obvious routes that might be under observation. Her smaller size proved advantageous as she navigated through dense vegetation that would have been more difficult for larger soldiers. After 4 hours of careful movement, Sarah reached a ridgeline that provided excellent observation of the target area while offering good concealment options. She spent another 2 hours establishing her hide site, using local vegetation and careful positioning to create a position that was virtually invisible from more than 30 yards away. The surveillance phase required 18 hours of continuous observation during which Sarah documented all activity in the target area while maintaining perfect concealment. She recorded vehicle movements, personnel patterns, and security procedures, building a detailed intelligence picture that would be evaluated by the instructors. The most challenging moment came on the 2nd day when an instructor patrol passed within 20 feet of her position. Sarah remained absolutely motionless for over an hour as the searchers investigated the area, occasionally stopping to examine locations that might conceal a student. Her camouflage and discipline were perfect. The patrol eventually moved on without detecting her presence. The culmination of the exercise came when Sarah was required to engage a high-value target at 700 yards, while simultaneously avoiding detection by security forces. She had one opportunity to make the shot before extracting from the area, and failure would result in elimination from the program. Sarah studied the target area carefully, calculating range, wind conditions, and potential extraction routes. The shot would need to be perfect, not just accurate, but timed precisely to avoid detection during the crucial seconds after firing when her position might be revealed. When the target appeared in her scope, Sarah controlled her breathing and made final adjustments for wind and range. The crosshairs settled on the target, and she slowly increased pressure on the trigger. The rifle fired, and through her scope, she watched the target fall cleanly. Without hesitation, Sarah began her extraction, moving quickly but carefully away from her firing position. She had planned multiple routes based on different scenarios, and she executed her primary plan flawlessly, reaching the extraction point without detection. When the exercise concluded and scores were tallied, Sarah had achieved a near-perfect evaluation. Her fieldcraft, marksmanship, and tactical execution had all exceeded standards, and she had demonstrated the complete skill set required of operational snipers. "Martinez, that was one of the finest student performances I've seen in my career," Stone told her during the post-exercise debrief. "Your planning was thorough, your execution was flawless, and your discipline under pressure was exemplary. This is exactly what we're looking for." With 2 weeks remaining in the program, Sarah found herself among the top candidates in a class that had started with 12 students. 5 had been eliminated for various deficiencies, and the remaining 7 were competing for final graduation slots. The pressure was intense, but Sarah felt confident in her abilities and prepared for whatever challenges remained. The other candidates now viewed her as an equal competitor rather than an outsider. The jokes and skepticism that had marked her early military experience were distant memories, replaced by genuine respect from some of the military's most elite soldiers. As she prepared for the final phase of training, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. Less than a year ago, she had been the target of laughter when she first picked up a military rifle. Now she was competing with the best marksmen in the military for a place in one of its most prestigious programs. The transformation seemed almost impossible to believe, but the evidence was undeniable. She belonged here, and she was ready to prove it in the final challenges ahead. The final 2 weeks of Scout Sniper School represented the culmination of everything Sarah had learned, not just during the program, but throughout her entire military journey. The remaining 7 candidates faced comprehensive examinations, advanced field exercises, and a final shooting test that would determine who earned the coveted sniper qualification. The atmosphere in the class had evolved dramatically from the first day. What had begun as a group of strangers competing against each other had transformed into a tight-knit unit of professionals who respected each other's abilities. The initial skepticism about Sarah's presence had been completely replaced by recognition of her skills and determination. Master Sergeant Stone addressed the remaining candidates on Monday morning of the 7th week. "You 7 represent the best of what we've seen in this class. But earning the qualification requires more than just being better than the soldiers who didn't make it this far. You need to demonstrate that you can perform at the level required for operational deployment." The final academic examination covered every aspect of sniper operations, from basic ballistics to advanced tactical planning. Sarah approached the test with the same methodical preparation that had served her throughout the program. She had spent the previous evening reviewing her notes, practicing calculations, and ensuring she understood every concept that might appear on the examination. The 3-hour exam was comprehensive and demanding. Questions ranged from complex ballistics problems requiring multiple calculations to tactical scenarios that tested decision-making and operational planning. Sarah worked steadily through the material, drawing on months of intensive study and practical application. When the results were announced the next day, Sarah had again achieved one of the highest scores in the class. Her academic performance throughout the program had been consistently excellent, proving that her success wasn't limited to practical shooting skills. "Outstanding work again, Martinez," Stone said privately. "Your academic preparation has been exemplary throughout the program. You've demonstrated mastery of material that challenges experienced soldiers." The final field exercise was the most demanding yet, a 4-day operation that required candidates to plan and execute a complex mission independently. Each student received a different scenario, but all required the complete range of sniper skills, including reconnaissance, target engagement, and extraction under hostile conditions. Sarah's mission involved infiltrating a heavily defended area, conducting surveillance for 48 hours, and engaging a high-value target before successfully extracting without detection. The scenario was designed to test every skill she had learned while placing her under maximum stress and pressure. Planning the mission required careful analysis of terrain, enemy positions, weather conditions, and multiple contingency plans. Sarah spent 6 hours developing her approach, studying aerial photographs, calculating shooting solutions for various engagement scenarios, and planning extraction routes for different situations. The infiltration phase began at midnight on a cold Wednesday in December. Sarah moved through the winter landscape using night vision equipment, carrying her full combat load while maintaining complete silence. The approach to her target area required crossing 2 miles of varied terrain while avoiding detection by instructors playing the role of enemy forces. After 5 hours of careful movement, Sarah reached her intended observation position overlooking the target compound. She established her hide site using techniques perfected over months of training, creating concealment that would allow her to remain undetected for the next 2 days while conducting surveillance. The surveillance phase tested patience and mental discipline as much as technical skills. Sarah maintained continuous observation of the target area, documenting patterns of activity, identifying security measures, and gathering intelligence while remaining absolutely motionless for hours at a time. On the second day, her position was nearly discovered when a patrol passed within 15 feet of her hiding place. Sarah remained perfectly still for over 90 minutes as the searchers investigated the area, occasionally stopping directly in front of her concealed position. Her camouflage and discipline were flawless. The patrol eventually moved on without detecting any sign of her presence. The mission's climax came on the third day when the high-value target appeared in the compound. Sarah had spent 2 days studying the area, calculating exact ranges to various positions and planning her engagement. When the target moved into her predetermined shooting position, she was ready. The range was 850 yards, the longest shot she had ever attempted under operational conditions. Sarah made careful calculations for wind, temperature, and atmospheric pressure, then settled into her shooting position with the calm focus that had become her trademark. The crosshairs steadied on the target, and she slowly increased pressure. On the trigger, the rifle fired, and through her scope, Sarah watched the target fall immediately. The shot had been perfect, hitting center mass despite the extreme range and challenging conditions. Without hesitation, she began her planned extraction, moving quickly away from the firing position toward her predetermined route. The extraction phase required 6 hours of careful movement through terrain now actively patrolled by search teams looking for the sniper. Sarah used every stealth technique she had learned, moving only when conditions were favorable and remaining hidden when discovery seemed possible. When she finally reached the extraction point, Sarah had completed one of the most challenging exercises in the sniper school curriculum. Her mission planning had been thorough, her execution had been flawless, and she had demonstrated the complete skill set required for operational deployment. "Martinez, that was an exceptional performance," Stone told her during the post-mission debrief. "Your planning was professional level, your field craft was outstanding, and that shot at 850 yards was simply remarkable. You've proven that you have everything required to be an operational sniper." The final shooting test took place on the last day of the program. Each candidate was required to engage targets at ranges from 300 to 1,000 yards, demonstrating precision and consistency across the full spectrum of distances they might encounter in operational deployment. Sarah approached the final test with confidence built through months of intensive training. Her shooting had improved dramatically since that first day when she surprised everyone at basic training, and she now possessed the technical knowledge and mental discipline required for precision shooting at extreme ranges. The test progressed. Through increasing distances, with each range presenting its own challenges, Sarah engaged targets methodically, making careful calculations for each shot and executing with the smooth technique that had become second nature. Her shots came in steady rhythm, each one hitting cleanly in the scoring zones. When the test concluded, Sarah had achieved a perfect score, hitting every target within the required specifications. It was a remarkable achievement that demonstrated not just exceptional shooting ability, but the mental toughness and technical knowledge required for the most demanding marksmanship challenges. Graduation day arrived with 7 candidates standing, in formation, wearing the distinctive ghillie suits that marked them as qualified scout snipers. Colonel Harrison attended the ceremony, along with other senior officers who recognized the significance of what these soldiers had accomplished. "Today you join one of the military's most elite communities," Stone addressed the graduates. "You have proven yourselves capable of performing under the most demanding conditions. But remember, earning this qualification is just the beginning. Your real test will come when you deploy operationally." When Sarah stepped forward to receive her sniper qualification badge, the moment represented the culmination of an extraordinary journey. Less than a year earlier, she had been the target of laughter and skepticism when she first picked up a military rifle. Now she stood as one of the military's most elite marksmen, having outperformed soldiers with years of additional experience. After the ceremony, Stone approached Sarah privately. "Martinez, in 20 years of military service, I've never seen a more complete transformation. You arrived here as a promising candidate, and you're leaving as one of the finest snipers I've ever trained. Your grandfather would be incredibly proud." The statement brought tears to Sarah's eyes as she thought about the patient old man who had first taught her to shoot. His lessons about patience, discipline, and trusting her instincts had carried her through the most challenging experience of her life. As Sarah packed her equipment and prepared for her next assignment, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The laughter that had once greeted her attempts to prove herself had been replaced by genuine respect from the military's elite soldiers. She had not only survived in a world that seemed determined to exclude her, but had excelled, beyond anyone's expectations. The small woman who had once been dismissed as too fragile for military service was now qualified to deploy anywhere in the world as a precision marksman. Her journey from target of mockery to elite sniper proved that determination, skill, and unwavering focus could overcome any obstacle. The rifles that had once seemed too big for her hands now felt like natural extensions of her will, and the laughter that had once stung was now just a distant memory of a person she used to be.